Greetings, everyone. Well, this is a movie that a lot of you have been asking me about for quite some time, wanting to hear my thoughts on the movie and also on the various Blu-ray editions out there. So I think it's about time we actually sat down and talked about Dr. Manhattan's Penis, the movie, today on the Multimedia Chronicles. Welcome back. Yeah, Watchmen. Who watches The Watchmen? Well, obviously I watch The Watchmen. I watch a lot of The Watchmen. I missed the comic book when it originally came out and didn't read it until about a year later when it was reprinted as a graphic novel. And even then I didn't actually get around to reading the whole thing until a little bit later. But suffice to say, I've been a fan of the comic book for a very, very long time. I mean, really, from the time it came out to the time I actually sat down and read it was a span of maybe 2 years. So that was, what, 1985? Yeah, so 25 years ago? Yeah, so I read it 23 years ago. I'd say that pretty much makes me a fan more or less since the beginning. And as early on as back then, when the comic was fairly new and it was getting rave reviews in both the comics press and the non-comics press, just the literary press, it was one of the first comic books, I think, really to get recognized as literature. It made a lot of waves when it came out. So even as far back as then, there was talk of doing it as a movie. But of course, can you imagine if they did Watchmen back in 1985? I'm sure it would have been entertaining, but I'm sure it would have been seriously dumbed down from what we now have in the form of the current movie. Now, I have to address this whole Dr. Manhattan's penis thing for a moment. I mean, come on, seriously. Is that all you notice? You watch something like this and is that all that sticks out in your mind? I mean, seriously, are we like all 12 years old in sex ed class, sniggering in the back of the class, the funny names for the body parts? I mean, come on. Come on. You're presented with something like this, which is a really deep, multi-layered, intelligent story, and all you can think about is Bluecock? Give me a break. If that's all you can focus on and that's all you can remember from the movie, then I'm sorry, but you're not mature enough to be watching this kind of story. Go back to kindergarten, because clearly you got some catching up to do. You know, again, why do people focus on that so much? It's like, do you even understand the character of Dr. Manhattan at even the most basic level? He has evolved so far beyond being a normal human. I mean, he is like a god. The kind of powers that he has is just phenomenal. So, do you think he really cares if other people see his dong? No. It doesn't even... It is so far below his perception of the universe that it doesn't even register as something to think about. You know, it just doesn't register. The only time he wears clothes is when he has to, when people tell him he has to, because... Not that he doesn't know, it's just he doesn't care. He really doesn't care. And it is such a non-issue. So anytime he's not on television or making some kind of public appearance, he doesn't wear clothes. Because it doesn't matter. And that is perfectly in line with his character. And I don't understand how so many people didn't understand that. Or just got so turned off. It's like, oh, I see some blue penis. It's not like he was walking around with a raging erection the whole time, throbbing and dripping all over you. No, it was flaccid. Who cares? People are just so frickin' immature, seriously. Yeah, honestly, it really irritated me. The fact that, you know, having been a fan of the graphic novel for so long and having waited for the movie adaptation for so long, as I'm sure a lot of you were, it really irritated me that that seemed to be the thing that everybody was focusing on. The other thing was just the level of willful ignorance when the original trailer came out, and I saw so many comments on YouTube postings of the trailer saying, oh, it just looks like a Dark Knight ripoff. Okay, this was like over 20 years before The Dark Knight. Not Batman, obviously, but the movie, The Dark Knight. It's not a Dark Knight ripoff. It's nothing like The Dark Knight. In fact, Watchmen is nothing like any superhero story ever done before or since. It is completely unique and completely different. You know, to say that it's a ripoff of something is ridiculous. Does it pay homage to certain comic book archetypes? Yes, of course it does. That's kind of the point. It's taking those archetypal characters and putting them into this dark alternate timeline where things went considerably different, where costumed heroes were real. But it's not just a slam bang action adventure superhero story. In fact, there's very little action in the whole thing. The vast majority of it is social commentary, deep, well-developed character stories, and just generally layers upon layers of story, character, and intertwining of lives and experiences, and there's just so much to it. So much to it. And it really, honestly makes me sad when I see some of the ignorant remarks that I've seen towards it. You know, I mean, this is something that we've never seen before, and will likely never see again, at least not to this extent. You know, I'm talking about both the movie and the comic book. This is a unique experience, and if you can't appreciate it, then GTFO, as the saying goes. You know, it's not for you. Maybe when you grow up a little bit, you'll appreciate it. But whatever. Now, a lot of people ask me, as a fan of the comic book, what did you think of the movie? Well, overall, I thought they did a fantastic job, honestly. Now, a lot of people talk about some of the changes that were made. And yeah, there were some changes, but as with any adaptation from one medium to another, there are necessary changes, and then there are sort of technical changes that are made for pacing purposes. Now, in the case of Watchmen, I think a lot of the changes were made just to make the static image format of the original comics work a little better in motion as a motion picture. You know, you can't convey exactly the same thing in pictures that you can convey in motion, and vice versa. You know, the two are very similar. You know, comic books and movies are compared a lot and have been for decades. In that comic books are probably the closest you can get to movies, except that there's no sound and the pictures don't move. But otherwise, they're both visual mediums, primarily. So one would think that it would be easy to translate one medium into the next. I mean, we've seen it for years. We've had comic books adapted into movies, and movies adapted into comic books. And comic books based on the movies, based on the comic books. It just goes on and on. So why were there so many changes in The Watchmen? Well, honestly, there weren't that many. I mean, they cut out a few minor subplots, but the vast majority of it is there. In the Ultimate Cut Edition, they have the motion comic. So if you're too lazy to sit down and read the comic, watch the motion comic. The motion comic is more or less an uncut adaptation. There's a few little snippets here and there that they cut out, just for pacing purposes, I guess, but for the most part, the whole story is there. Now, the motion comic runs about 5.5 hours. The Ultimate Cut of Watchmen, which is the single most complete adaptation we are ever likely to get in the history of mankind, runs 3.5 hours. So, 2-hour running time difference. But here's the big thing, is they changed the ending of the movie from the ending of the graphic novel, as most of you will know. But the end result of that ending is essentially the same. You know, Watchmen was never intended to have sequels. So as long as the end result of the ending is the same, that's fine. So if you had to take a slightly different route to get there, no big deal, as long as the end result is the same. You know, some people were disappointed by that, but in the behind-the-scenes featurette, Zack Snyder talks about that quite a bit, and it actually makes sense, the way he explains it, as to why he made that change. And I honestly, even as a almost lifelong fan of the comic, I actually have no problem with that change, because as it was explained, and what would have been lost if they had kept the original ending, I think they chose the better path to go with the ending they went with. Essentially, the ending that they went with is simpler and flows a little bit faster and doesn't require as much explanation. So if they had gone with the original ending, it would have required a lot more explanation. Zack Snyder said that it would have taken about 20 minutes of screen time just to explain what was going on in the ending if they had gone with the original graphic novel ending. So they went with the alternate ending instead, so they could deal with that sequence of events very quickly and explain everything very quickly, and then have that 20 minutes of screen time to focus on other aspects of the story. In particular, you know, one thing you'll notice is Watchmen is very character-driven. There's a lot of character arcs, a lot of character stories going on. So by changing the ending in that way, it allowed them to focus more on a lot of the character stories. Now that's something I have no problem with. If it means we get to spend more quality time with this really interesting, well-fleshed out group of characters, then I don't mind taking a bit of creative license on the ending. Again, as long as the end result is the same, I don't mind so much how we get there. Plus, there are certain aspects of the ending that I think actually work better. Spoiler alert! Okay, I'm going to assume everybody's seen the movie from this point on, so there's going to be spoilers from this point on. Okay, for example, at the very end, when Dr. Manhattan kills Rorschach, in the original comic book, Night Owl and Silk Spectre are off in the pool room somewhere of Ozymandias' palace, getting it on. So they just basically go off to have some nookie while Dr. Manhattan has his final confrontation with Rorschach. Now in the movie ending, Night Owl and Silk Spectre actually stick around for the events. And Night Owl actually sees Dr. Manhattan kill Rorschach, which is great. It's a great culmination of Night Owl's relationship with Rorschach actually being able to witness his death. I mean, these two were good buddies. I mean, they had a long-standing friendship, long-standing relationship that, you know, it was, I think, did more justice to Night Owl and was more fair to the character of Night Owl to actually have him be able to experience Rorschach's death like that. There's always going to be people out there who insist that everything needs to be kept verbatim to the source material. I mean, it was the same thing when Lord of the Rings was adapted as a trilogy of fantastic frickin' movies. There was all the hardcore fans of the book up in arms that this was changed or that was changed. It's like, well, you have to change stuff when you adapt it into a different medium. In the case of Lord of the Rings, if they had kept everything absolutely verbatim from the books, you realize how fucking boring those movies would have been? A lot of people would say they're boring already. They just don't like the story. Do you realize just how dull and plodding those movies would be? So yeah, of course, Peter Jackson breaks things up. He cuts back and forth between the various parts of the group that are on their respective mini-quests to accomplish the main quest, and jumps back and forth between them. In the book, it like stays with Frodo and Sam for 1,000,000 pages as they're just trudging through the forest, you know, which in a book, it reads fine. It goes fine in a book. But put that on screen and people are going to be snoring after 10 minutes. You just can't do that. So in the case of Watchmen, really, the changes they made were pretty minimal. Another one that springs to mind is when Rorschach discovers the child killer's lair. And in the original comic book, he, of course, kills the dogs. As you know, that part's all the same. But then when the child killer comes home, he actually knocks him out and chains him to the radiator and then sets a bomb to go off. He throws the guy a hacksaw and says, yeah, it'll probably take you less time to cut through your wrists than it'll take to cut through the handcuffs by the time the bomb goes off. So it cuts to Rorschach going outside, and then he kind of intercuts at the killer looking at the hacksaw and realizing what he has to do. And then a couple panels later, the bomb goes off, and then Rorschach just says, you know, I stuck around, nobody got out. So that was pretty effective. You know, it was a nice little thing with that Saw obviously saw and decided to run with for 1,800 movies. But in the movie, of course, it's completely different. He confronts the killer much more directly and ends up hacking his head to hamburger with a meat cleaver. Now, a lot of people had problems with that because it was a pretty radical departure from the way that scene played out in the comic book. And, you know, honestly, it could have gone either way, but I think that it made sense to change that. I mean, first off, primarily because of Saw. If they had left it in as it was, fans of Saw would have been screaming that that scene was a Saw ripoff, even though technically it's the other way around. But the other thing is, the way that scene plays out, I think is beautiful. I mean, it's disturbing and hard to watch as hell. Just the whole child killer aspect of it, and that whole story is just heartbreaking. But you see, and this is a testament to what a fucking amazing actor Jackie Earle Haley is how much emotion he's able to convey with the full Rorschach outfit on. We don't see his face. We don't see his face, yet we can feel everything that Rorschach feels. especially in that scene. As the child killer is basically talking to him, you can feel the rage and just, you know, hate rising in Rorschach. And when he finally cuts loose and just hacks the guy to bits with the meat cleaver, it's a catharsis for you as the viewer. You feel relieved to have, you feel that release with Rorschach. That's probably a horrible thing to say, but tell me I'm wrong. You want to see that child killer get hacked to bits, because child killers get no mercy in the books of most people. You know, they're the kind of people that just, yeah, deserve no mercy. You know, anything to do with harming a child, yeah, no mercy. So I think it was amazing the way they changed that, and I think it worked very effectively on screen. There were some other little changes. There were some other little changes, like Laurie not smoking. Actually, I don't think there was really much smoking at all in the whole thing. There's a lot more smoking in the comic book, which almost worked as a parallel to how the two Silk Spectres felt about their lives. I mean, Laurie was really unhappy and miserable, so it's almost like, you know, fuck it, I don't care, I'm just going to smoke even though I know it's bad for me. And, you know, and then her mother was like that too. It's just kind of like her life was, you know, she felt, she had a happy face on the outside, but then on the inside she was, you know, really hurt just by a lot of things that happened in her life. The smoking just seemed to be a part of that overall feeling of misery of those two characters. It's like, I know a lot of people who, when they're depressed or stressed, smoke. I know a lot of non-smokers who've taken up smoking because they've been excessively stressed or whatever. Go figure. Yeah, so anyway, there was a lot of minor changes throughout, but I don't think it was anything to get up in arms over. Now this one really irritates me when people say something like, oh, that movie sucks. And it's like, oh, why? Well, because it wasn't what I was expecting. It's like, so what you were expecting somehow defines whether or not the movie sucks. The movie does not suck, okay? In any way, shape, or form. It is wonderfully crafted as a film, and it is one of the single most faithful adaptations of a graphic novel we have ever seen. Ever. Okay? By any stretch of the definition, the movie does not suck. Fine if you did not like it, but the movie itself did not suck. Okay? There has to be a clear distinction there. Because it's not what you expected does not mean the movie sucked. It just means you didn't do your homework. You should have some clue as to what a movie's about. And I mean, Watchmen has been around since 1985 in the form of the graphic novel. So it's your own damn fault if you didn't read the graphic novel before going to see the adaptation of the graphic novel. Alright? So don't go blaming the movie because you were too lazy to do your homework. And it's not like it would have taken a lot of effort to find out what it was about. It's not like there aren't millions of Watchmen fans out there who happily would have given you a 3-line summary of the gist of it. You know, I mean, come on. I see that a lot with movies. It's like, oh, that movie sucks because it wasn't what I expected. It's like, how does what you expected have any bearing at all on what the movie is? You know, I think, honestly, I don't know. I just blame the stupidity of the movie-going public in general. They see it as a superhero movie and just think it's going to be like another X-Men or Spider-Man or Batman or something like that. And Watchmen never has been a story like that. I mean, the whole point to Watchmen was that it was a unique and different take on the whole sort of superhero costumed vigilante concept. And I guess that just goes over the heads of a lot of people. Well, I think that's it for this edition. I wanted to sort of just talk about some of my thoughts about the movie. I mean, obviously, something like Watchmen, there's just so much to it. I could talk about it for days. There's just so much you can talk about with it. But, you know, the long and the short of it is, I loved the movie. I loved the graphic novel. I will watch these Blu-rays many, 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 many times over the years. And I'm happy to have them. Now, as for the Blu-rays themselves, we'll talk about those next time. Alrighty, that's it from me to you for now, so until next time, thanks for watching, and sayonara. Dr. Manhattan's Penis, the movie. I am, of course, talking about... Fuck. Dr. Manhattan's Penis, the movie. Today on the multimedia. Fuck. Greetings, everyone. Well, this is a movie. A movie? No, it's not a movie. This is a video about a movie. I think it's about time we talked about it. I'm, of course, talking about... What the fuck am I doing? Okay, how many more times can I say talk about? Going walkabout. Doing a talk about. Greetings, everyone. Well, I think it's about time I talked about it, because I actually have 2 Blu-ray editions of it, and... Fuck. Let's just go. You realize how dull those Now, I got to address this whole Dr. Manhattan's Penis thing. I said that in the intro just kind of as a little joke, but, you know, honestly, it really took me aback to see just how focused so many people were on that one small aspect, well, aspect of the movie. Is that all that sticks out in your mind to you? Sticks out? Yeah. Anyway, it really irritated me that that seemed to be the thing that everybody was focusing on. The thing. Yeah, I gotta watch the double entendres for this little discussion, shouldn't I?